I'm Jennifer Archuleta, the host of Unfiltered, where the truth hurts, but it also heals. This is a space for anyone willing to get honest with themselves, because in the end, it's you versus you. This is Jennifer Archuleta, and you're listening to Unfiltered. Today, I'm joined by Anne Fundner, a mother whose world changed in a single moment. Her son, Weston, was just 15 years old when he took one pill. He didn't know it was fentanyl, and he never woke up. What you're about to hear isn't just a story of loss. It's a story of love, of strength, and of the kind of pain that never leaves, but somehow moves forward. This conversation is not easy, but it's one every parent, every teenager, and every family needs to hear. This is Unfiltered, and this is Anne's story. So, Anne, before you were advocating and before Weston passed away, what kind of mom were you? Where did you grow up? What was your life like?
Well, before Weston passed away, we were in Dana Point, California. All my kids were born in Scottsdale, and we were there for the first 8 years of Weston's life. And then California is always where I was trying to move back to. We had moved there early 2000s when Eric and I both lived in New York City, and then we separately moved to California. We had known each other for a while, but then when we got married and then we realized we were going to have our first child, we moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and we had all four of our children there. And then when my youngest was 3 weeks old, we moved back to California. We moved to Dana Point. And I was a very involved parent. My kids were always Christian school. They went to Scottsdale Christian. Well, Weston did. My others were too little. But then we transferred over to a Christian school in the Dana Point area. And then, I was just very involved right away. I got involved with the PTF. I got on the gala board and did all the artwork for the donated art at all the art program at our school. And room mom. I became an ambassador for my son's kindergarten, and I just was always in and out of the classrooms, and my kids played sports. I was always present, always there at all the sports. We traveled, I was there. My husband always took the boys camping, at least once a month with a group of guys. They had like a camping group together, and we're just very involved parents, bonfires at the beach, dinner at the table every night. We had a beautiful life.
How long have you been married?
For almost 20 years.
And how long have you guys been together? I always like to count that.
Well, we were friends for several years, and then we dated for a couple of years before we got married. So we've known each other since early 2000, like wow. right before 9/11. So.
And then were you a stay-at-home mom?
Yes. Yeah. I was a stay-at-home mom. My kids were my life. I had all of my friends were my kids' friends' parents, and we had a very nice life. We really did. We did everything together. And when I was in Scottsdale, I was very involved with the Scottsdale Moms Group, and I just every step of the way, I was there, and I was a very present parent, and I had such high hopes for my son's future and for all of my kids. You think of things like we got him braces so that when he was older, he'd have this amazing smile and hopefully help him get a job and, send him to preparatory school so he'd know, that it's expected of him to go to college because, once he goes to college, then hopefully he'll get, a great job afterwards. And we put him through cotillion, which he loved. Which taught him manners and, I guess, socialization, like kind of how to speak, at a very young age, looking people in the eyes. Cotillion was like such a, I think in Scottsdale it's called junior, is it junior B, or
I
it's
can't
kind of,
remember, but I know what you're talking about. But you
yeah,
were just a thoughtful mom. You thought about everything
I tried.
to make your kids' life wonderful and to make them wonderful people and all the things. That's
Yeah.
you. And what are the ages of your kids now?
So I have a 9-year-old boy, 13-year-old girl, and 15-year-old boy who's almost going to be older than Weston was when he passed away. And then Weston would be 18, senior in high school and graduating right now.
Yes.
So,
I know our almost the same age. I did hold mine back, but yes. That's
yeah,
why your story has always touched me because I've watched your family grow throughout the years. And every time I look at my son, I think of Weston, and it's always a constant conversation. It's always been in my mind. I know you know that we don't talk often, but you know that my heart speaks to you always about Weston, some way, somehow, whether it's on social media or I'm always thinking about him. And I think a lot of people are. Tell me about Weston, not the story that people read or things like that. Tell me what kind of kid was he? Was he funny?
yeah,
Um, was he good in school? Was he sneaky? What kind of kid was he?
yeah. A little bit of all of it. He had such a compassionate heart for everybody. He really just lived to make other people smile and their hearts smile. I had a fourth grade teacher when Wonder first came out. They were reading Wonder in fourth grade, and I remember his teacher. And we tried public school for 2 years, and when we first moved to Dana Point, and there were 40 kids in his class and one teacher, and he said, "These kids are loving Wonder." He's like, "But let me tell you something. In all the years I've taught, and I've taught a lot of kids," he said, "Weston gets it." And I'm like, "What does he get?" And he's like, we read Wonder, and he has this compassion for the main character that I've never seen in anybody else ever. He feels this kid's, pain and what he's going through, and he's got a real compassion for him. And he's like, his heart is amazing, and that was Weston. He really thought of everybody else, and he he would always help the kids. Like, if I remember, he came home and he's like, "Mom, this kid was bullying this kid at school," and I'm like, "Well, um did you say anything?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, I'm like, "But he's your friend, the kid that was bullying him." And I'm like, "Did you tell him that?" He's like, "Yeah, I told him. I told him to cut it out and leave the kid alone." Like, even he would even stand up to people that were his friends if he knew that it was the right thing to do, was to put him in their place and say, "That's not right. You don't treat other people like that."
So tell me a little bit more about how was he with the siblings? Was he a protector? Was he
Yeah.
an agitator?
Yeah.
All of them?
He was a little of everything. He was a little mischievous. He was a little bit, he was very responsible. He,
He was responsible.
yeah, he was a he was a really normal kid. I mean, he got into his little trouble here, but he, like all kids, like to push the limits. But he was also just a real kind and thoughtful kid. He really was. He was a great big brother. All of his siblings looked up to him, but did he try to poke at them to like annoy them? Of course. He was the big brother. He had three younger siblings, so he definitely, but it was all in love and fun. Their
How
guy,
was your relationship like with him? Did you guys talk about everything? Was he more private?
honestly, if I could have like the perfect relationship with a child, it was him. And we talked about everything. And I remember he first liked a girl in seventh grade, and
Seventh grade.
yes, oh my gosh. And you know, he would tell me about her, and it just what he liked about her, and he would tell me if kids at school said something that bothered him, or if anything. I mean, if something was bothering him, he'd come and talk to me about it, get my advice on what to think. And but yeah, we had a very open relationship. He had a girlfriend when he died, and we talked about her a lot too. He was a freshman in high school, and she's become like a daughter to me. But he talked to me about, everything. And, we talked about drugs, we talked about peer pressure. I was always a parent first, but he knew that he could talk to me and I'd give him, the level-headed answers on life, and the right and wrong. And I always tried to give him the moral answers as well. When we talked about things, but I was very, very big on speaking to him about drugs from a very early age.
And were
Um,
you open with him? Like, I always tell my kids, like, I'm not perfect. I was young once, all those things. You had
yeah,
conversations. He knows, that he can come to you with everything and anything, but he also knows that you're fallen as well, right?
absolutely. Because kids seem to think that like parents never lived.
Yeah.
They
I
think you're like
know.
frozen in this parent age,
And we're
and they
still living and we're still making mistakes.
absolutely. But he definitely, I think he was surprised when I was human and he realized, I was once a kid and I can relate to some of the things that he would talk to me about. He didn't talk to me about anything too serious. And, he was a
Just
pretty mellow
normal.
kid. He was mellow. You know, he was not a troublemaker in any way. I didn't have to worry about him making trouble. He was a decent student at his freshman year. He was a 3.5 GPA. Before that, he kind of struggled a little bit before that, I think, with more of his attention problem. But once we got that kind of focused, he did really well in school. He was organized. He liked to clean his room. He liked everything. Right. So he was a really good kid, and he loved cooking. So he wanted to open up a restaurant one day.
So
So he,
that's what he aspired to be, was a
a chef.
chef and own his own restaurant. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
I love what you said about being a parent first. Sometimes I think parents try to be like friends or, buddies, and it just doesn't work. Was he more a mama's boy or was he a daddy's boy?
yeah. No, mama's boy for sure. But he looked up to the logic that his dad gave him.
Mhm.
But he definitely was a mama's boy. I mean, I could still sit and cuddle with him. And about a month before he died, in the middle of the night, he crawled into my bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night and he's sleeping there and I'm holding him. I didn't even realize it. And it was just so nice. He was always my snuggle bug. We were always close. Always treasure that.
Yeah. I always tell my kids I've been a parent as long as Jet, he's my oldest, and I always say, like, I've only been a parent as long as you've been my child. We're all just trying our best. It's not easy. Sometimes people know not when their time is coming, but was there something that stood out or something happened? Maybe the snuggling that one night that isn't
No,
usual.
no,
Nothing.
I don't know why. He was just starting at a new school, and maybe there was some anxiety there. I'm not really sure, but I was surprised. But it was such a beautiful gift.
It
So
was.
I held him, I snuggled him, and I'll always be thankful for
Yeah.
that.
I know when they get older, it's hard to get that snuggle time. I'm sure there is something definitely divine about that
Yeah, yeah,
beautiful moment.
it was
You
nice.
know, when if we could talk a little bit about the day it happened.
Leading up to this, he called me the night before. I missed his phone call. That will always haunt me.
You missed his phone call.
Yeah. I saw it coming in because somebody had asked me to watch their bag. I was away. I was in media at the time, so I was on media row at CPAC. He was actually supposed to come with me, but last minute, he had a girlfriend. He really didn't want to leave. He had friends there, and his grandma was there. So his dad said, "Just leave him home. His grandma's here. Just he wants to stay home with his friends." But I wanted him to come with me because I thought it would be neat for him to see all the politics and all this, the things that go into this stuff that I was involved in. But plus, it was in Florida. I just thought it would be fun to spend time with him. He was going to bring a friend of his too. So I got the phone call that morning, and that's, you know, it's the moment I never it blindsided me.
And you were away, which is devastating.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I had to, try to figure out how to change my flight, how to get home, and Um, United, who I was flying with, was full. Kept saying, but my son just died. And she literally said, I can't help you, and hung up on me. And so my sister found me a flight, an American, and they were amazing. Um, the flight attendant noticed something was up with me. And I said, I need internet. She's like, you needed to do that when we were on the ground, but I was so distraught. And I knew that, but I don't normally fly American. And so I looked at her and I said, I need the internet. And she's like, she looked at me and she said, are you okay? And I just looked at her and she said, what's wrong? And she said, come with me. And she walked me up to the front and I just told her what happened. And she literally sat with me up on the jump seats the whole trip. And the pilot like got my connecting flight shortened because it was a 5 hour layover in Dallas or Houston, I don't remember. And then I had to get on to another flight after that. The pilot set everything up so that I would be, taken care of in between. They gave me vouchers, but she sat with me the whole time. This one flight attendant, I had another one come up to me and said, "Do you mind if I pray with you?" So, I mean, I will always be eternally grateful to American Airlines for helping me that day. They even called me like a week later and they were like, is there anything we heard about what happened? Is there anything that we can do for you? United Airlines customer care called me. They were just really incredible. So they helped make things easier. But I will tell you that flying home and having all that time go by knowing that you just lost everything that meant the world to you. It was horrible.
I couldn't imagine, Anne. I didn't know that you were gone.
I'm
That
sorry.
No, that just adds a whole nother layer of just the anxiety and needing to be there for your other children too and your family.
Yeah, I wanted to hug my son. I wanted to go home and hold him, and he wasn't going to be there. And I wanted my other kids.
And you needed a hug.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard day. So I got home around 11 o'clock at night, and my husband picked me up at the airport. His sister had flown in earlier, so she drove them. And I don't remember a time. It's a traumatic response where you kind of block everything out. You stop remembering, you know, events that happened.
Yeah.
Things a little fuzzy after that, but um,
But you got the phone call, so who calls you?
my husband, he called me and he said he's dead.
Oh my gosh.
Who? Thought he was gonna tell me his cousin or somebody, and he's like Weston. I was like, what? And I hung up the phone and I pick it back up and I call 911. I'm like, I need 911. I gave him my number and my address in Dana Point. She's like, you're calling Florida, and I said, well, connect me to Dana Point, please. I need an ambulance. And she said, I'm sorry, I don't have any way to do that. You got to find the number and call them. I'm so sorry. And she felt so bad. She's like, I'm so sorry. But then my husband, I called him back and he's like, they're already here, and he's gone. And I didn't want to accept it.
So he was found at home. Your husband found him.
Yeah. He
And
he always, we always check on our kids in the middle of the
yeah.
night. If we wake up in the bathroom or something, we'll check on the kids, make sure everyone, is breathing, and he wasn't. He was gone.
And
And
do you know how long he was gone? Like when the ambulance came?
no,
There
no,
was no
I
home
didn't.
when they were.
No, and that was the whole other thing when I'm sitting there flying on the plane. Do you want to donate his organs? And yes, I would love someone his heart to continue beating. I would love that. Um, and I said we can't get an exact time, and we're within like 1 hour of it being too late. And I was like, just please, just do it. And she's like, I gotta wait for the coroner to tell me.
So no friends were spending the night or things like that. It was just Weston. And he was just there. Do you know how he got the pill and what happened? Had he ever done this before or things like that, or even like smoked pot or got drunk or anything like that?
He was a freshman in high school, so you know, he was starting to do stupid things at a new school. I really had a very close watch on him. The kid that gave it to him, he met earlier in the night. Um, and he was the kid that everyone wanted to be friends with. He would rent out the penthouse at the Hard Rock Cafe in San Diego and have a party. And I didn't let Weston go. All of his friends went though. Nope, I was not going to let him go.
As freshmen, they went to the Hard Rock?
I did not let Weston go,
Yeah. But I
but
mean, other kids went?
I was so surprised. I said,
Yeah.
one of my friends, you're letting your son go to that? And she's like, the parents are going to be there. I'm like, are you sure about that? And she's like, no, but I think so. He said they would. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not letting Weston go, but that's just me. And she let her son go. I guess it was a big rager, but you know, that's what I remember back in high school, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to go to the big parties and we wanted to be part of it. Fitting in and at that age, especially a freshman, and now Weston was brand new at that school. He had just transferred in a couple weeks earlier. And, it's a whole new crowd. His Christian friends weren't there anymore. Everything was changed. And, he was just looking to fit in somewhere. I underestimated the power of peer pressure because he's such a headstrong kid and he always knew what he wanted. But this was something that I never thought he'd be susceptible to.
But he
And
thought it was not that this makes it any better, but he thought it was a Percocet. It
so,
wasn't like it was ecstasy, or sometimes people think
no,
the
yeah,
Percocet, it's Xanax, it's not going to do anything. But that's what he thought he was taking.
because he knew what it was. His doctor had tried prescribing it a couple weeks. Not that he tried to prescribe it, he offered it, and he said, his hand's not broken. If you want, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of swelling. I could give him a prescription to Percocet, but it is a narcotic. And I said, no, we'll deal with Tylenol and think he'll be okay. We'll ice it. I don't want my son taking an opioid at his age.
Yeah.
And so Weston had heard that, and so I think when he was around this small crowd. He was in the inner circle. There were very few kids there, and they were, doing this thing. I think he thought, oh, Percocet, my doctor tried to give it to me. It's got to be safe. I'm just going to take a quarter of it, which is what we think he took, is about a quarter of it. And I think he just thought he could get away with it. Came home, went to bed early. He called me, um, but my husband said he didn't seem like there was any distress or anything, and he just went to bed, and that was it.
Do you know the boy that gave this to him?
I don't know him.
Oh,
No,
so
no.
nothing has happened to him, even though you know that this pill was given to your son, Weston, by this kid. There's no legal ramifications, nothing.
No, and I've learned that this kid is a supplier, and that's why he could throw parties at the penthouse.
Oh yeah, because he has.
So he had stalked my son. I had learned that too, but I didn't learn all these things till after. I learned it was a homicide investigation, so they considered it a murder as opposed to, a drug overdose. But they always call it a drug overdose. We're fighting now, to get things like that changed because it's a poisoning. And I'll tell you the difference is if you go to a bar and you order a glass of wine and they give you grape juice and cyanide and you die, you didn't die from drinking alcohol. They poisoned you. And there's no difference when you think you're taking a Percocet and it's blue press powder with fentanyl, which is more deadly than cyanide per volume. That's how my son died. He was poisoned to death. This was not this kid's first death. He had killed somebody else in his past. He knew it was deadly and he still kept giving it. So they didn't press charges because he was not quite 18, and under the age of 18 in California, they don't really prosecute.
Mhm.
Um,
So do you think he knew the pills were laced, or is it just like rolling the dice?
there's things that I'll never know, but I don't think so. But there's things that I'll never know. I wasn't close enough with any of these kids to know where I could, say, hey, I know I don't know you well enough, but let's talk. If it happened with his friends at his school before that, his Christian school friends, or even like his close friends, I could ask. But that people have tried to piece things together for me, but for the most part, it was just a crowd that I really don't know. I wasn't there.
So
And
none of these kids tried to reach out to you after they obviously heard about this. None of them tried to reach out and offer some kind of condolence or information or anything.
A lot of them came to the funeral, but a lot of them are just kids just like Wes.
Yeah.
Um, I do, I do, have feelings about it's it's really hard. It's toiling to your heart because here you're like, here's like another stupid kid. 17 and a half
Yeah.
years old, he's ruining his life. And he's being stupid. What is he doing? And he's a kid. And as a parent, it's really, really hard to like follow that. If it was like a man or something that's talked to my child, it would be a lot easier to like hate him. But it's really hard that another child, it was just really stupid.
If he came to you and asked for forgiveness, would you forgive him?
I have a Christian heart.
I know that's one. It's a tough question to ask, and it's a tough question to answer. I don't know if
I don't know enough about it. I know you think like if anyone ever touched my kid, I'd kill him. That's how you think. But then when something like this happens, you find out it's another kid, and there's a lot to it.
Mhm.
It really messes with you emotionally. I can say that. But, whether or not you think 17 and a half year old is a child is, debatable. I mean, they can be tried as an adult at that age. But at the end of the day, he's still a high school kid. It's something really stupid. And unfortunately, I don't know what's gone on with him since. Heard not great things, but it was all assumption at this point.
Are you going to try to like pursue something down the road?
But what I would like to see pursued, because in the state of California, they don't prosecute kids under the age of 18.
Mhm.
Um, why didn't they go for the guy who supplied this kid? Why
Absolutely.
didn't they go and try to find everybody knew the guy's name was Benny. That's all I know is that's what the only thing in piecing this all together is that this kid got it from a guy named Benny. I told the prosecutors this, they did nothing. They said, we don't do that. And I said, well, why don't you do that? That's crazy. They said, that's not how we do things. And I'm like, I don't know why, because this guy Benny is just going to kill more people. And let's find out where Benny's getting it. Is he getting it right straight from the cartel? Is it coming over the border? Like, how are you going to stop this if you don't follow it? And they said, we don't do that. And I
So
couldn't understand it. I'm starting to stand up on my own 2 feet. We were pretty messed up for a couple of years. My kids were robbed of normal parenting for a couple of years because I mean, you can't imagine how do you live after you just lost like one
I
of
guess that's my next question is how did his siblings react? What did they do? How did they do they all grieve differently? I
yeah,
mean, this is a large family.
very. My daughter couldn't handle things for the longest time. She was coming home from school every day. My son, my littlest, was 6 years old at the time, and he would see me crying, and he'd be like, "Why are you so sad? He's with Jesus, Mom." And I tell you, the innocence is just it breaks your heart, and it's just he's right. I'm sad because I miss him. And he's like, but we're still here, he said to me.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. It was really a very wise moment coming from my 6 year old. And then you have my oldest now, who was my second oldest before, who's now got to learn the dynamics instead of the second child, the middle child. He's now got the dynamic of the oldest. And he's always been this way, though, really even keeled. You really don't know what he's thinking, what he's feeling. He's always very um, stable. I don't know how to say it. So they do all grieve very differently. Um, but mom and dad weren't doing well.
Is
And
somebody doing better? Like,
yeah,
or was there good day? Obviously, there's good days and bad days, but you and your husband, your marriage, a lot of people divorce after something like this.
yeah,
Where did you find your strength in your marriage?
we're working on it.
Yeah.
um, right away, I was like, God, why did you do this? My son was loyal, to you. We were loyal to you. We went to church. We We loved God. Why could this happen? And I saw my faith that I used to say, my faith could never be shaken, ever. And I saw my faith tested. And I all but walked away. There was this little, you know, size of the mustard seed. It was probably about all I had left. And I had some horrible conversations where, God, I let him have it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't even know if he welcomed me back in for some of the things I said to him. But it wasn't working. And I saw our family was falling apart. Everything was falling apart. We truly lost everything. And I finally said, God, this is not working. It was about a little over 2 years into this. So it was last year, right around this time. I said, this is not working. And I said, I think I need you because it's not working without you. It just seems like every time we try to get up, we get punched down again. It's like every single time we saw a little light at the end of the tunnel, we just, something would happen and we'd be like, why can't anything good happen to us? And I recommitted, silently, quietly, and there was no groundbreaking moment. Just, God, I need you. And that's when about a few days later, I got the call, and I've heard your story. The Trump campaign is looking for everyday people. And I know your story about losing your son. Would you be willing to speak with the RNC about what happened to your son? They want to talk about border issues. And I said, yeah, I would absolutely. And that she introduced me with to them, and I started the interview process and the video submission. I went through like 3 or 4 interviews, and ultimately they chose me to be part of the RNC.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to listen to God, and maybe He's just going to tell me this is what you're going to do, and so many times over those 2 years, people would be like, I know you don't want to hear this, but God had a plan. And I was like, I hate his plan. It sucks. Why isn't my kid? Why isn't somebody else's kid that happened to? This is not, why is God doing this? Is not a loving God that would do something like this to us. And they're like, I know you feel that way right now, Anne, because you're in a lot of pain. Weston's life had a purpose. And it angered me. Hated when people said that. But as soon as I walked out on the RNC stage, I was so nervous. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't prepared for it. Do I say hello? Do I say good evening? Like,
Yeah.
it even occurred to me. I looked at everyone and went, hi. I didn't know what to do. And I gave my speech, and I saw how they saw an everyday mom who loved her kids. And this still happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw America kind of relate to my story, going, oh my God, this could happen to us. And I assure you, it could have happened to anyone. And the response I got from that, and the conversations, like you said, that have been started, and what came out of that speech, which I had no plans of it happening, is literally wanted to get on stage, deliver it, and get off stage as fast as possible. I was so nervous. And what happened there, I went, my son's life had a purpose because he's saving other people's lives now. And everybody knows Weston's story now. They remember the mom from the RNC, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, didn't matter. Everybody had heard the story. And it started a conversation in homes.
And it
And
doesn't matter what side you're on. It was a young kid who made a silly mistake
yep,
that ended his life. You can't change your past, but you changed your perspective. And I cannot say just, how I'm inspired every day. Just, I don't know how you wake up, how, you go on. I mean, I know having other children does help,
yep,
but you are very strong. And I think a lot of people see that and they know that. And your story is giving purpose. And again, I keep saying it, but it's given my family just a lot of those hard conversations.
thank you. Yeah. And I'm glad that people are having these conversations because there's so many people that don't. I had talked to Weston about drugs since he was little, so he really truly did know better. But like I said, you have to talk to them about peer pressure too, and give them. Yeah, I always tell parents role play with your kids. Have a conversation. What are you going to do when there's a group of people and maybe there's a girl that you like and she's, kind of like, you know, you almost think she might be out of your league, but she's kind of, giving you a little bit of attention. You think she might like you, and now she's doing it and she wants you to do this with her, but you like her so much, you don't want to let her down. How are you going to get out of that? Because that's strong. Or this kid, is like the ringleader of, popularity, which is like being a billionaire in school, social
Yeah.
status worth its weight in gold. So this kid wants to friend you and put you into his inner circle. You're gonna like have the social life of a rock star in high school. How are you gonna say no? How are you gonna do that? Not my thing. My mom's about to pick me up. I gotta get home. What are you gonna say to get out of that situation? Because when that opportunity, I don't want to say opportunity, when that happens, when you're in that position and it happens, and it will, because
Mhm.
all kids are presented with peer pressure at some point. So when that happens, how are you going to say no? And every kid's confronted with it. I mean, there's very few kids that probably have not been offered something at some point. How are you going to say no? Some kids aren't susceptible to it. I wasn't. I could have been around so many people, and I just was never interested in ever trying anything. I think I was, I liked being in control of my life too much, try anything that I didn't know what was going to happen to me. So I never was. But there's kids that just will do things because they want to try something to fit in, just so that they get that social status. So I always say it's very important that you talk to your kids about drugs because they are not the same as they were 20 years ago. You cannot make mistakes anymore. You die from them. It's in everything. It's in marijuana. If you think it's not in marijuana, people say it's a myth. It's not. I can show you dozens of parents who have lost their kids from smoking pot that was laced with marijuana. Um,
Are there any tools that you would recommend? Like, I know there's Bark. I drug test my kids. I've always done it.
that,
Do you start doing that at a young age? Then that could be an out. If you're peer pressured, you can say, you know what, I get drug tested. I
yeah,
can't do this. Is what tools would you recommend as a parent? I mean, do you just old school snoop through things, go through
yeah,
drawers, go through
yeah,
phones,
yeah.
just do it
All the
all?
I will say that kids that are over drug tested, especially for like marijuana, will turn to things like opioids because they don't really stay in your system long enough to show up positive on the test. So you got to be careful with over testing your kids. I've heard parents that have done that were over testing, and so they started doing things that wouldn't show up. And that's really where you get turning you know, without meaning to, you're turning your kids to other drugs.
Mhm.
Um, the biggest thing is to have a conversation and really just have make sure they have an understanding. Kids think they're invincible, and that's a big problem. They don't think it's going to ever happen to them. I didn't think this was ever going to happen to me and my family. That was, fentanyl for heroin addicts. Like
Junkies, yeah.
that's yeah, and that's what most people think that they have that stigma and that label, but they it's not. It's really for, it could happen to anyone. And I've also really learned about a lot about addiction, and it's tragic because you just have this anxious child that probably was handed a really bad hand growing up, or maybe they couldn't handle something that happened to them when they're young. Maybe they socially were awkward. Maybe their parents fought a lot. Maybe they went through a divorce. Maybe someone hurt them inappropriately. Who knows what made them turn to drugs in the first place? But I can tell you that all these kids that are even addicted to drugs, I have a new heart for, and the stigma needs to disappear because even that could happen to anyone. I mean, you have someone like, look at Hunter Biden. His dad was a president, and he, had addictions, and
Yeah, it can
um,
happen to anybody.
it can happen to anyone. Um,
When the police looked for evidence with what happened, what do they look at? Do they look at a Snapchat? Do they look at text messages? Like, what's their go-to to look for this kind of information?
Yep. They take the phone. That's it. You get it back about 2 years later.
But
You're
you
in
don't know specifically what they look for.
they look for
I feel
everything.
like Snapchat
Look,
is a big gateway to.
this kind of thing. And at least I've heard that. And it's very scary. I hate Snapchat. I love the filters, but I hate Snapchat.
That's the thing with Snapchat is my daughter really wants it for the filters in it, and I'm like anti-Snapchat because I see the effects of death that come from Snapchat. Too many kids die from Snapchat because you can snap someone for $7.50. They can leave you whatever it is on your doorstep. And let me just say this because I don't think a lot of people understand this about fentanyl. Once you try fentanyl one time, I don't care how it gets in your system. I don't care if it was put in your drink. I don't care if you smoked it. I don't care if you willingly took it in a pill. Once you try it one time, you will never stop. It is 50 times more addictive than crack.
Mm.
And if you heard like this guy was a crack addict, you're like, what? That's bad. This is 50 times more bad.
So a little bit of it could be in a pill that you get from a drug dealer. And then you just keep going back for those drugs. And then it's like rolling the dice if you get too much.
No,
That's it.
it's usually 7 out of 10 pills first time are deadly. These are kids that are not opioid dependent. They're opioid naive. Opioid naive means that they're not used to it. Heroin addicts, people like that, they've they've built up a tolerance to it. It's a tolerance building drug. So I want to also specify this. The fentanyl that you get is not the same as the fentanyl that you get. And illicit fentanyl is not the same as pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical has been cut, diluted, measured, mixed, perfectly portioned. This is concentrated. It's illicit fentanyl. It is the precursor chemicals. It's called fentanyl, but it's nowhere near chemically the same as what you get in a hospital. It's probably mixed out in some field in Mexico by the cartels in a big garbage can with blue pressed powder, sprinkled in with, a container that's probably, from a laundry container for all I know, a little, white little container that they've cut the top off, scooped up the fentanyl. They have their, big, um, gas
Hazmats.
mask, everything, and they start sprinkling it into this big vat, mixing it, sprinkling more. There's no measurement here. I mean, they're just eyeballing. And they press them into pills. Each pill has some sort of fentanyl in it, and it's a chocolate chip cookie effect. So the side of the pill might have all of the chips, the other side might not have any. So it depends what side of the pill you get. Depends on how much they sprinkled in on that piece that pill that you got. 7 out of 10 pills are deadly. And if you try fentanyl one time, this is a grooming behavior, which is, I mean, just like in any business, they train people very well. And, I told you that I found out later my son was being stalked. All their goal is to give it to you free the first time. Then they get you addicted. If they can get you to try it one time within 2 to 3 hours, you're going to have muscle aches, bone aches, cold sweats, fevers, headaches, bowel issues, nausea, vomiting. And the only thing you can do is tell your parents that you tried something illegal. And kids don't like to disappoint their parents. And so then this drug groomer, who is no different than a sexual predator, will groom your child into taking the next one to say, I'm going to ease your pain for you. Just take a little bit more. Don't take too much because you're not used to it. But take this little tiny bit. It's going to get you through that. It's going to take all those horrible withdrawal symptoms away. And they get your kids addicted. And so now you have a child who tried something to fit in, who is now addicted immediately. Brain's rewired already. It happens right away. Rewires your brain. 50 times more addictive than crack. Withdrawal symptoms they can't handle. They can't tell their parents. Drug dealer knows this. Drug dealer says, you can't tell your parents you did something illegal. You could go to jail. I could go to jail. You're going to put me in jail. You're going to get your friends in trouble. They did it too. And it's going to be because of you if you tell. So then they guilt them into it, just like a sexual predator. It's no different. These guys are evil. And so they get your kid addicted. And the next thing you know, your kids are buying fentanyl pills. And, they don't live more than a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month and a half.
It's a grain of sand, right? It's just like a grain of sand. And that's it. And
It's like 2 pieces of salt, table salt is enough to kill you. My son, again, he was opioid naive. His had less than 2 milligrams. They say 2 milligrams is what killed you. So his blood didn't even have that, and he died. It stops you from breathing. It puts all its effort into getting your heart pumping, but you can't breathe. And so these kids are dying in their beds in their safe haven. Um, Eventually they can't breathe. It shuts off your breathing. And unless you have someone nearby with Narcan, which only works about 20% of the time, um, you know, you're
So
not
let
going to
me
make it.
ask you this. I have, along with an EpiPen, because I've had a lot of kids come over my house with allergies, I do have the Narcan. It's the one that you put in your nose. And I have my son, oddly enough, people might think I'm crazy, carry one in his car.
Of
If
course.
somebody were overdosing, would that work?
Um, yeah, it well, I mean, if that's what it's designed to do, probably it depends on how much they took. We have people who have 24 times the lethal amount to kill you. So such a small amount can kill you.
Yeah.
You
And it's
know,
immediate, right?
it's pretty. It's the more that's in there, the more immediate it is. I don't know. I have to believe that it was, my son didn't struggle, but I don't. That's my hope. Um, I I've been told that he had to have been as high as a kite, that he didn't know what was happening to him. Um, but it stops you from breathing, and so you got to get Narcan in right away. And a lot of these kids still don't make it. So you can give as much Narcan as necessary. If you just have one, you want to get about 5 more, and you just keep administering it until it wakes them up. And if they have too much in their system, they're not going to get woken up. And if they do, they're probably still going to get put on life support, and there's a good chance they're still going to have to pull the plug.
So for
Uh,
all those kids that smoke marijuana or think like, they can, it's in everything. It's not just a pill. It's not ecstasy. It's not, Percocet. It can be in marijuana, anything.
Anything. There are weed dispensaries getting shut down now for they're finding traces of fentanyl because it's so addictive. So the idea is something that addictive, they want to put in maybe even just a small amount that they think that they could get away with it not killing somebody. But then someone always ends up dying. And so these dispensaries are like, if we just make this a little more addictive, then they're going to come back to this dispensary because they're going to know this dispensary is going to make them feel the best. So it's going to take away those symptoms. So it's evil what's going on. It's in dispensaries. They've recently found them in vapes. And I want to be very clear about that. I want to say it again. They recently found them in nicotine vapes. So don't tell me this isn't intentional. They're making it look like candy for children. Kids are dying. I see toddlers come in all the time to our Lost Voices of Fentanyl is a group that I'm very involved with. Um,
What are the statistics? Do you know? Is it like, what is it, 1 in 10 right now? Like, what is the age that we're looking at? What is like the youngest kid that would try it that you've heard of in your circle?
so we had a 30-something-year-old woman give a pill to a 10-year-old boy a couple weeks ago that came into our group. This evil woman gave a 10-year-old a pill.
And he died.
They're targeting kids because if you think about it, what are two dynamics that these drug dealers have never been able to harness on a regular basis? And they don't care if you die because they're just going to give something to somebody else and they're going to get that residual person. I told you, you cannot stop once you try it. It's not a matter of if you're going to die, it's when. But these people will buy these pills by the dozens until they're dead. So the goal is to get people hooked. It is the number one killer. It used to be 18 to 45, is now 15 to 48. It's the number one killer in the United States, more than guns, cancer, COVID, car accidents, more than all of the C's. And it is the fastest growing demographic is under the age of 14.
Wow.
We see toddlers whose parents may have used or have an aunt uncle who put something down that had fentanyl on it on a table. Then this little toddler comes along, puts his hand on the table, puts his hand in his mouth, and the next thing you know, this toddler is dying or found dead in their crib later, and or on the floor wherever they find him. It's not just isolated, incidences. We see toddlers come in constantly. I just approved another one last night. They're coming in by the dozens. It is so lethal that even residue left on a table. I don't know if you remember that Airbnb story that you heard of probably about a year and a half ago, where a little girl, the parents rented an Airbnb. Their daughter just out of nowhere, I think she was a year and a half old or so, died. right in front of them at the Airbnb. They had no idea what happened. And it turned out 2 weeks prior, there was a party in the Airbnb where they were doing lines of cocaine that were laced with fentanyl. And this little girl somehow got some of that residual on her hand, put her hand in her mouth, and she was dead. There's too many children. We have a whole banner of toddlers that are dying from it. But it's tragic. It's disgusting. I want people to know the industry. I want people to know the evil of how this is being pushed, because it is being pushed. Excuse me. It is being pushed the same way a sexual predator would approach a child that they wanted to molest. It's the same thing. They are cunning, conniving, manipulative. They speak your language, and all they care about is making money. They've harnessed. This is, I don't know if I finished my thought on that. They have found a way to harness two demographics: recreational drug users and children. Two demographics they have never been able to consistently make money off, and they can now. And they don't care that they're killing us. And every time they kill one kid, you have a whole entire family who dies with them, and it's crippling us. So 500,000 people later who are dead, there's a million set of parents without children. And it's, it's something that is a horrible, disgusting industry. And this is why I fight so hard for legislative changes, for changes on, dealing with the cartels. It was very important to me to label them as terrorists, because they are. And so that's what I do now. Really, I push a lot in the politics of it all. I just want American children and Americans to be safe. So that's where my primary focus has been, in educating parents to peer pressures and talking to your kids about drugs. But I do want
talking to your kids as young as 10.
5. I talk to kids. I've talked to Weston since he was in kindergarten, and I was part of Not My Kid out there in Scottsdale. It's a big organization out there. And, they were very adamant about talking to kids from a young age. My son knew not to do drugs ever. He knew, but we didn't have, fentanyl. I didn't even know what it was when my son died. I mean, I'd heard of it. It was like, you hear of like a police officer in a drug bust touched something, went into the skin. And whether that's true or not anymore, I think that's a debatable issue. I think they're finding that it's gotten airborne, and that's how these people are collapsing when they do drug busts. But, that's what I heard of it. I had never, ever heard that it was something that could come into my house. Like, that's crazy. No way. But it is that readily available. Like I
When
said.
Weston passed away, it was during COVID, right?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Okay.
No.
No. I thought it was during COVID for some reason.
COVID changed the landscape on everything, though. I think it gave way for a lot of things to loosen up. And while we had our eyes on one thing, I think there were, others organizing on the other side. And I think, drug use started to come up. I think everyone saw that picture of AA 2020, which was a stadium filled with people. People were, housed in tight quarters. A lot of people were drinking. I think the businesses they said that did so well were like the gambling, the alcohol, all of that. And, honestly, people with mental health issues really had a hard time with the isolation. It gave way to drugs coming into this country by the massive amounts. And then we had the next, 4 years of, just pouring in aimlessly. So, you just saw the rise of fentanyl, but none of us knew what it was. We were all blindsided.
Yeah. So Weston's friends come around, his old buddies, and that's healing for you to see them and see them grow. And I there's a picture that you shared that was you draped over Weston.
I couldn't even put my head together on it. It made no sense at all. I just remember, and it was such a strong feeling. I never want another parent to ever feel this way. It's the worst feeling in the whole world. And I don't know why. I just had this huge conviction that I never, ever And it was a very powerful, very strong, very loud conviction. I never want this to happen to another parent ever. I never want anyone to go through this ever.
Do you have any signs that Weston gives you that you can share?
I pray to God to please let me, let me see him in my dream. I've had a couple of dreams. I don't know if they're from God or if they're signs. I believe that Weston is disconnected from this world and that he's in heaven in Jesus's arms. So I don't really know if I want to hear from him because I don't know, if God should allow it, then I would love to. But if I hear from him, I'd know that it would be from God. But God says in the Bible that they're not they don't reach out to you.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean they tell you not to go near mediums and fortune tellers and stuff like that, but um you know that's very natural to want to do. And at that time frame where I was really angry with God, I really wanted to. I had considered reaching out to a medium, and actually had a woman reach out to me, and she started just talking, and I was like, I really don't think I want to hear this. But I do believe that God does allow them to speak to you.
Mhm.
My husband had an interesting experience, but I've had small dreams. My one dream, I kept saying, God, please let me talk to him. Please let me talk to him. And I did have a dream, and I saw him sitting there, and I said, how are you doing? I love you. I miss you so much. He's like, I'm okay, Mom. And I said, are you with Jesus? And he said, of course, Mom, I love Jesus. I'm with Jesus. Please don't worry. I'm okay. So that was my one dream. I do pray, I've heard of visitations and stuff like that. I'm trying to find the Christian answer in all of it. So, when I say I don't want to, that's not true. I would love to hear from him, but I want it I want to know very clearly that it's coming from God because I do, I'm a very spiritual person. I do believe that there are, there's evil all around us, and, they've witnessed our lives, and they can say anything they want, make you think that it's there, it's you talking to somebody that you love just to draw you away from Jesus and take your eyes off of Jesus. So I've committed to keeping my eyes on Jesus, knowing that I will see Weston again one day. And I know right now that I just need to follow wherever God's going to take me.
Do you blame anybody? Do you blame yourself? I know as moms, I blame myself about everything. It's not even my fault. Do you blame yourself? Do you blame Weston? The obvious.
I'm so mad at him.
You are still.
I am so mad at him. I'm always like, why? You knew better. I'll sit there. Some parts of the day I'll be really sad, and then all of a sudden I'll get really mad at him. Like you would get mad at your kid. Like, well, how could you be so stupid?
Yeah.
Like, how could you do this? You knew better. Um, I, yeah, there's a lot of emotions that go on, but there's always mom guilt.
Yeah.
I don't know that anything would have changed. I feel guilty that I was away that weekend. I feel guilty that I didn't take him with me like I wanted to. But at the end of the day, God knows your days and how many you have, and your days are numbered from before you were born. He knit you, he knit you together in your mother's womb, and he knew the exact amount of hairs on your head and the exact amount of days you would be alive. So I have to believe that if I was flying on a plane or if I was eating dinner or no matter where we were, that was Weston's time. And for whatever reason, God, had predetermined how long my son was going to be here and what his purpose was going to be. And there's where my faith has really gotten very strong. And that's recent. It hasn't been that way for long.
Well, his purpose is living through everything that you do. I mean, it's absolutely amazing what you've done with this tragedy.
I mean, I plead with God all the time. I'm still in the bargaining phase. And with grief, you go back and forth. There aren't the 5 stages and you get over it. Maybe with an old person when they die, but not with a kid.
And what are the 5 stages? You're mad.
There's like the anger, the acceptance, the bargaining. I think, I bargain. It's a great chart, but it's not anything.
Every day brings something new, whether it's good or bad. You're
Yeah,
just making it through every day.
You're cycling through those same, I think, 5, stages of death and grief. again, when an old person dies, like your parents or grandparent, and you know they've lived a good life, they've left a legacy, they've lived a full life, they did all the things that, maybe they didn't do everything they wanted to accomplish, but they got to, to
Totally.
a part of their life, and they had kids, maybe grandkids, left a legacy. When a 15-year-old dies, it's not normal. That's not normal. It ruins the natural progression of life. And it's a grief that never stops. And for the rest of it feels like it happened yesterday. There is no difference. I can deal with it. I can wake up and talk a little bit easier. I'm getting more used to, talking about things openly. I don't usually go into such detail as I have with you. But it's usually a lot quicker, these conversations.
We appreciate it because everybody knows the statistics of it, but people don't understand. Like you said, I couldn't imagine every day there has to be a hole in your heart. You have to find a way to fill it, and then be there for the rest of your kids.
Yeah,
And unimaginably having to get on a plane that far away and
it was
fly
hard.
home. I can't even imagine how you did it. I
It was
didn't.
almost cruel. And that's where a lot of my anger, I'm like, God, like everything was horrible. There's nothing, I mean, it was
Easy
just
about it.
horrible. It was horrible. But
And
that's
that's
trash.
where the empathy comes in. Like if you're at the airport, people don't know you just lost your son, and here's a woman hanging up on you and things like that. Didn't you just want to shake them and say, "Oh my gosh, like I just got this news." And
Yeah. Well, that when I told that my son had died and she still hung up on me, I'll never forget that. But the second flight was not as easy. And then I was like, do I tell him that I lost my son because I don't want to use that as an excuse to try to get like,
yeah,
treatment. But at a time like that, your heart is so broken. Like you almost, it's okay to ask for help. And I was so afraid to ask for help on that second flight. So I just stayed quiet. I sat in my seat and cried the whole way home. Probably the people sitting near me knew something really horrible had happened. They just didn't know what, but I didn't. The second flight was harder. Um,
but your
there's
work that you're doing now, and I see a lot of it. How time consuming is this? How are you able to do this? Is there any work life balance? Are you just all in? I mean, I have to imagine you said you lost years of your life. You're still every day is questionable how you're gonna be that day. Like, how do you manage to do it all? And are you
I don't.
exhausted? Do you just
I mean, I'm. My kids know I love them. Um, they know that getting up every day without Weston is really hard. But they know that I love them so much that I do it and that I'm going to do whatever it takes that they're successful and healthy and happy. So I just get up and I keep going. But now they know I have this new fight, um, which has brought a lot of healing. Um, and that this is something that's really important to our whole family. It's also important to America, but they also know that they're important. I have to make that time for them. And there's plenty of time. Trust me, I'm not booked on media all day long.
looks
Uh,
like it? No.
it's,
Is there one child of yours that is like, I want to do this fight with you? Do you see that in any of your kids? Is there one that leans more towards, doing what you do to get the message out?
no,
No. It's
now that my
easy.
daughter's getting older, she's kind of starting to poke around a little bit. She went to the RNC with me, my other two didn't. Yeah, it's hard to take your kids because you're sitting around all day, you're not doing much, you're sitting, waiting to go on. And it's just not really a place for kids. There's nothing to entertain them, especially at his age. So I don't really take them to be a part of it, but they do see me on TV. They're really proud of what I'm doing. They know it keeps my son alive as well, and there's a big part of that. My son, his memories being, revered. He didn't die in vain, and they respect that. But I'm not doing it as much as I'd like. I would like
Yeah.
to be out there. If I could talk about this all day long, but I'm still always a mom first, and I'll always be a mom first. Um, until my kids have moved on, and then I hope I'll be a grandma. And, my family is always going to be the most important thing. And that's where I'm always going to put my attention. I have big things in the works. I'm hoping to start an organization that, will educate parents on peer pressure and educate kids on drugs. And um, that's something that's in the works. Also, other pressures, sexual pressures, internet pressures, eating disorder pressures. I want to start an organization on a grand scale, and that's something that I'm really kind of mapping out right now. Probably be able to do that, with my kids at school. Hopefully, that will help, my kids, and
Well, it's all about just touching one person at a time. And like I said, you've touched me. I know I've shared your story with many of my friends, and you've probably saved more lives than you even know.
I
What would you say to somebody listening right now? Words of advice to a mom. I mean, we've said it over and over again. We can't say it enough. It could be your kid. It could be anybody's kid. It could be, marijuana. It could be a Percocet. It could be a 10-year-old. It could be a 5-year-old that hasn't been told. Don't pick things off the ground
yeah.
in a hotel and eat it. Have
We
those conversations.
So at Lost Voices of Fentanyl, we do have children's resources that teach exactly that. Don't pick up Ziploc plastic bags off the ground, because it really truly could have fentanyl in it. If there's a kid that took gummy bears to school, found a bag and just stuck his gummy bears in so he could share it with his friends. And the school, I don't know if you remember this in the news, about 5 kids had to be taken to the hospital because what was in that bag before had residual fentanyl in it. So we do have educational things like that. But if I could tell anybody anything, I assure you this could happen to you. We lived a beautiful life, and we're very involved and did everything right in a Christian home, Christian school, involved parents, sports, education, dinners at home, everything. Um, we really had a life that people would look at and be like, wish, I would love to have that life. We had, lived right overlooking the Pacific, and it was just a beautiful life that we had. And more than anything, my family had love, a lot of it, and my kids had so much love. And fentanyl still found my family and my son, and it could happen to you. So please be vigilant. Do not think that this could not happen to you. Teach your kids about peer pressure. Talk to them about never trying anything. This is not 20 years ago when we went to, when we were out, in college or in high school 20, 30 years ago. It's not the same generation of drugs. And, it's very important to teach your kids that, these drugs, this generation of drugs today is not safe. And fentanyl is not even the worst. There are things out there now, cart fentanyl, ISO, nitazines, they're more.
I've never even heard of these.
100 times stronger than fentanyl, and they're lacing fentanyl with it. Imagine that. They're lacing fentanyl, and then they're going to
You said that stood out to me is that Weston didn't go looking for it. It found him. And I think that's very powerful to say that there are these people out there that are watching. There are other kids that are watching. What kind of kid are you? Do you need to fit in? Are you having anxiety? All
yeah,
those things are things we need to look for. And I'm a snooper. I like to
yeah.
snoop. That's what I do. If you could leave us with something that Weston loved, or a quote, or his favorite book, or something that really makes him smile, what would that be?
Well, Weston loved surfing. He loved cooking.
What was his favorite recipe? Something he
You know,
loved.
he made these amazing burgers. He had this recipe that even at his school, they had like a contest, and he's like, his teacher was like, I didn't think it would work. He made these amazing hamburgers with just some seasonings that were just incredible. And he's like, I didn't think it would work, and they were like some of the best burgers I've ever had. So right when we heard that, we had him make. We had our Fourth of July party, and we had Weston do all the burgers for our Fourth of July party so that everyone could taste his burgers. But he was a good cook. He was good with seasoning. Whether he was making pasta or steak, or he just was always a little unique. As a kid, experimenting and trying.
I
Different.
love these people that are like, it's just a pinch, it's just a pinch.
Yeah.
And I do a pinch, and it's like, it's not good.
No, I like to cook too. And I always taught my kids if it calls for 1 clove of garlic, put in 10. So that's me. And I always taught my kids to season things. So I think he was a good cook. He was a good cook. I think he would have been good at it. But he loved to surf. He loved his friends. he loved his friends, and he had a lot of really good friends. He was a sweet kid. He had a heart of compassion. So remember
He had
Weston's heart.
just this light, just this beautiful light. We're going to show pictures on the YouTube, and you can just see just his smile. Well, I'm going to come and visit with all my dogs, and I'm coming for dinner. I appreciate you coming on, and I thank you for sharing your story. I know that this is going to be a good one for parents to watch with their kids, and it's definitely going to open up a lot of conversations. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing. I know this isn't easy, and not a lot of people would do it, and that's why you are who you are, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. Come here, Ezra. Come
Okay,
say hi.
let's see.
Come here. This is Ezra.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, she's a big boxer. Can you see her? Hi, baby
So
girl.
it's a puppy, or is it?
No, well, she's two. She's
Oh
two.
yeah.
Thanks for listening to Unfiltered. And remember, the truth hurts, but it also heals. If this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And now it's time for the pup of the podcast.